Alright guys, we're going to do a video about flashlights, everything you need to know about them, how to pick them out, about the features, safety stuff, everything. So this video is going to be a little long, so hopefully you'll bear with me because we're going to jam pack a lot of information here. So flashlights, one of my biggest complaints is that resources are kind of tough to come by. Most reviews out there are just reviews of individual flashlights, and they don't get into the nitty-gritty and the information you need to pick out a good one. So I wanted to kind of fill that void and give you the big picture. So let's start off. Of course, when you first start looking for a flashlight, the things you're going to look for when you initially start looking are size, brightness, and battery format are pretty much the three things everyone starts to look for. Of course, size, you don't want to carry these big honkers on the end here around in your pocket, nor can you put a pen light on your AR-15. So you have to get something that, of course, it's appropriately sized for the task that you want, or you could pick something in the middle that might be good for all three. So size is an important factor, and size has some stuff to do with it and some not. For example, like this TN15, big size, but the batteries on this thing last forever. Versus this one next to it is a cheap hardware store flashlight. Doesn't last that long. It actually takes 3 AA's, and you have one mode and it only lasts a couple hours if at best. So size does not always guarantee that it's going to run a long time. Size does not always guarantee it's going to be brighter than other flashlights. It is way more into it than that. So we'll get into it more as we go along. So size needs to be appropriate for your use, whatever that could be, whether it's a weapon light, EDC, everyday carry light, something you're going to put on your dresser in case of a power outage or emergency or that crash in the night, or maybe you're a search and rescue guy, police officer, firefighter, and you need the brightest flashlight that man has ever created. We all have very different needs, and establishing that, I think, is first and foremost. Second, we talked about brightness, which is usually measured in lumens. And I know it's 101 level stuff here for most of you guys, but we're going to try and move along quick. Lumens are a measure of the total brightness that comes out of the flashlight. And this can be rather subjective. Lots of times you'll hear people say, well, that flashlight's not 200 lumens. My XXX flashlight is way brighter than that. You have to bear in mind, lumens is the total amount of light escaping that flashlight. So for example, a flashlight like this $10 Coast is like 200 and something lumens. But as you can see from the light, it actually focuses. You can go from a focus beam to a flood beam. In this flood beam, there's no bright center spot. So this beam tends to be a big, wide area that's equally lit. So 200 lumens is dispersed amongst that entire area, versus when it's a throw light, which is the smaller, brighter center, you're going to have a very concentrated bright center with a dimmer spill, which is the outer ring you see there. So comparing the two of these, and luckily I had this flashlight to kind of show you, 200 lumens may look like this, and 200 lumens may look like this. And to someone, they may say, well, this isn't very bright, but that's because 200 lumens is being spread out over a larger area versus this as a smaller area. So I did want to point that out to you. So when you are dealing with flashlights that have more of a flood effect than a throw, the higher lumens are not going to have as good of an effect because those lumens are being spread out over area, so it's not going to appear as bright. So if you want a flashlight that has a really strong point of very, very bright light, you're going to need something with throw. And that brings us into the next part, throw versus flood. We just kind of got over it there. Throw throws out a beam like a laser. Flood floods the area with light. That's the best way to think about it. And that, once again, is a whole nother thing you need to decide. If you're, say, a search and rescue guy who's going to be looking at 200 yards for people in the woods, a floodlight will not work. You will never be bright enough to work at 200 yards, and to be effective at that range, you're going to need massive amounts of lumens, massive amounts of battery power. Not going to work. The throw light would be more appropriate in that situation because it does that narrow beam which can penetrate further and stay bright at further distances. So different applications, different uses. For example, a regular household EDC, a floodlight might be just great. You want to light up the whole room, a whole area, your whole car, great. Like I said, that outdoor, you need to see long distances, you might want something with a little more throw. I think throw also goes better when you're using it for a tactical application because you can get that brighter beam onto what it is exactly you want to see. So, okay, we've covered that. Next is battery factor. All different kinds of batteries out there, and the flashlight market has exploded in the last couple of years. And you can get batteries with almost any kind of flashlight, and this is just a small portion of what's out there. We have these 18650s here on the left, which are pretty much one of the bigger ones on the market. They usually they were like 4.2 volts or so. They're lithium ion. They can be very dangerous, guys. These things can actually, if you misuse them and abuse them, can explode, they can leak, they can really ruin your day. So you really need to do a little research on the safety if you're going to be using lithium ion batteries. They come as protected and unprotected. Some of them will have flat tops and not. And it's really important to learn about that before you get into flashlights. Some flashlights may be able to accept an 18650 is protected. Some may not. There's a slight size difference. Another very important thing to note. 14500 is the same exact size as a AA, except it's like 3.7 volts. Much higher, stronger power. Some flashlights are interchangeable. For example, this, where is it? Oh, here it is. This X-Tar can use the 14500 or the AA. Of course, it's weaker with the AA because the AA is only 1.5 volts. Some flashlights are capable of going between different types of batteries. For example, the TN15 can use 4 Cr123s or 2 18650s. Some can do weird things. Some of them can use all kinds of weird combinations, plus people make all kinds of weird adapters. There's a lot you can do with these batteries and flashlights. But once again, it's determining what your needs are and making sure you have the right flashlight for what you're doing. For example, knowing that these lithium-ion batteries can explode if they're overdrained or abused, you may not want to put them in a flashlight for like an shtf kit. Why? Because if you're going to be, in extreme environments, possibly falling, jumping, the flashlight getting smashed, these lithium ions, if they're damaged, there's a lot of energy in them. They can really cause and look it up, just look up lithium ion battery explosion, and you'll see. So when it comes to that kind of thing, if I know a flashlight is going to be hard use, I'm going to stick maybe with an alkaline or a nickel metal hydride battery. Even these Cr123s, even though they look like regular batteries, they are lithium ion, and they do have that same capability to go boom. These flashlights can turn into grenades if you use them improperly, which is kind of weird. Now, of course, alkalines and nickel metal hydride batteries don't do that. They're a lot safer, but they're a lot weaker, and you don't have as much capacity with them. So it is a trade-off that you have to consider. When it comes down to it, if I would never let my kid play with a flashlight with lithium-ion batteries. I would never let that happen. There are too many stories on the internet of these things exploding. It's just not going to happen. So for an around-the-house flashlight, it's going to be a AA or AAA battery. Because if my son's picking it up, playing with it, maybe he decides to whip it or throw it or something, he's a toddler, he does that stuff, I don't want a battery being damaged and then shorting out and exploding and causing a fire or something like that. So that is something to bear in mind. You may want the power for a certain application, but it may be also to your detriment. And not to say those accidents with the lithium ions are exceedingly rare. There's maybe only 20, 30 cases documented on the internet. At least well documented. There's lots of stories, but there's not a ton that are really well documented. So you do have to do a little learning, to make sure you're not doing something wrong when it comes to charging and using these bad boys. So it's a consideration. Some flashlights have removable extension tubes, like this TN15 again. This center tube over here is removable, so you can actually use this with one 18650 or two Cr123, so it has a wide range of options. A lot of these flashlights have a big range in voltages that their LEDs can support, between the circuitry and all that. For example, this TN15 can accept anywhere from like 3 to like 15 volts, which means you can use anywhere from 1 to 4 batteries. 4 Cr123s, you're talking like 12 volts. So it's important to know, if you can look it up and find out what your flashlight's voltage limits are, it's important to know. Like the X-Tar, that can handle between like, I think it's like between 1 and I think it's like 4.5 volts. It has a wide range, but there's other flashlights like this Convoy, which we haven't reviewed yet. It takes one 18650, but it cannot take two Cr123s. It cannot. Why? The voltage difference is, too much for it. One 18650, you're talking 4.2 volts. Two of these, you're talking 7 volts. 7, this isn't rated for 7 volts. It can make that flashlight go boom. Well, it probably won't go boom, but you'll just burn out the LED. So it's important to know, you have to do a little research. Just because two Cr123s are the same and work in a lot of flashlights that take 18650s doesn't mean your flashlight can handle it. You need to look up that working voltage and see what that flashlight accepts. So with that, next we're going to move on to features of these flashlights. All of them have different features when it comes to how they turn on, turn off, and cycle between modes. Some of them, like this pen light, are just as simple as a half click between the modes. This little through light here, which uses twisting the head cap to cycle through the modes. This O-light has a side which turns it on and off. Then you have to hold it in to cycle through the modes. What's going on there with that? Then you can sometimes hold them in. It'll bring you like a firefly mode. There's all different kinds of abilities they have. Some of these are mixed. Some of these you can do by clicking the tail click key halfway and also turning the bezel. So that can happen as well. Some just turn the bezel, like this Through Night Archer. Oop. Just the bezel turn. Some just have rear clickies, and I think we pretty much, that's pretty much what we have on the table here. So every one of them is different. It's important to kind of see what you want and what's going to work for you. Some people do not like tail clickies because if you put them in your pocket, they can activate. Some people don't like side clickies because the same thing. You put them in your pocket, they can activate. Some people don't like turning the head because same thing. It turns on in your pocket. For me, I think it's really important when it comes to an EDC flashlight and everyday carry is to look at what is going to happen with that flashlight if it does accidentally turn on. Some of these flashlights automatically go to high mode. Some automatically go to low mode. Some of them have memory and will go to the last mode that you set it to. So for an EDC flashlight, I prefer something with a memory mode, so that way I can set it where I want. If I know I'm going to a bad neighborhood, I can set it to strobe. If I know I'm going to be in my car maybe looking at stuff and don't want to draw attention, I can set it onto a firefly mode. So it is, once again, really important that you know about the function of the flashlight before you buy it. How does it start? Where does it start? What does it go to? Flashlights automatically go to high. Think like this O-light here. This has a memory mode, but if you haven't set that memory to something else, it automatically goes to high. Some flashlights, they all do different things. Some of these are single modes, like this Coast is just one mode, but it's important to know for your application. If you're trying to be discreet, say you're like a private investigator, having a flashlight that starts out in high may not be the best thing you want to do. Maybe you want one that starts out in Firefly all the time, or it has an option to go directly to Firefly, like this O-Light, where you just hold it in and the Firefly comes on. So that function can be really, really important as well. Oh geez, so we covered all that. One of the last topics to cover, we're going to kind of swing back around to safety. I think it's really important as well to know whether your flashlight is waterproof, shockproof. That's a given, but I think another big important thing is to note whether or not your flashlight has reverse polarity protection, which is if you put the battery in backwards, is it going to ruin your flashlight? Very important if you're leaving this out where maybe your kids can access it. What if they put the batteries in backwards? Is it going to fry your $70 flashlight? Good to know. Another thing is protected circuitry. A lot of these flashlights have protection set into them so that they do not discharge. Like the X-Tar here, it has discharge protection. You cannot over discharge the batteries in this. It will basically shut this thing down if the voltage gets too low, and they'll put it into like a Firefly mode so that you don't overdraw on the battery. It's really important because if you overdraw on lithium-ion batteries, it can cause a massive problem. So once again, you know, it's a good safety thing to know your flashlight, know all the features, and to know, will it protect itself from overdrawing the batteries? Will it protect itself from overheating? A lot of these flashlights will turn off after a certain amount of time. I think this O-Light turns off after, if you put it in high mode, after 4.5 minutes, this will basically shut down to a lower mode. A lot of these flashlights will do that. It's to protect itself. If it turns on accidentally, it will keep it from overheating. It'll keep it from overdrawing the battery. So thermal protection is also very helpful. Like I said, some batteries are protected. They do have internal protection in that battery. So it may not always be necessary. And it may be a redundancy, which is why some flashlights don't take protected batteries. But it's something you got to know. When you do your research, you got to look. Am I using the right voltages for these batteries? Am I using, protected versus unprotected? Does my flashlight kind of protect itself? If I have a flashlight that my kids are going to use, I want to make sure it's a very safe flashlight. I want to make sure it's a flashlight with, all kinds of protection to it. So I don't have to worry about it leaking, venting, or anything like that. One big example of this is Cr123 batteries. Now, they're often described as being pretty safe, but there are documented cases on the internet of them exploding. Interesting thing too is the Cr123s, the rechargeables are like 3.7 volts, which end up really being like 4 volts, and the the rechargeables are 3 volts, the non-rechargeables are 3.7. So, I forgot, maybe reverse there. But you have to look at that too. Sometimes the rechargeables don't have the same voltage, and your flashlight will operate differently and possibly even run hotter or dangerously hot if you don't put the right kind of batteries that are recommended into it. The O-Light uses RCRs, 123s, the rechargeables. That's what it's built for. It can use the non-rechargeables, whereas some of the other flashlights might have issue with that. So once again, it's a really big, important thing to pay attention to. I know I've dumped an absolute ton of information so far, and my battery's getting low, so we may cut out suddenly, and I apologize if that happens. Last thing we're going to cover is weapon lights. I think it's really important. Well, 2 more things. Weapon lights. Make sure your light is rated to go onto a weapon if you're going to use it. Otherwise, you're just going to break it. Flashlights like this Nightcore P12 are very bright. They have a 1-inch body, and this is rated to take, the recoil of a gun. So same thing with this TN15 and this O-Light M21, which hasn't gotten much attention here today, but this is one I just got today and haven't had a chance to review. So make sure if you do intend to use it as a weapon, it is rated for that. If not, what can happen is as you recoil, the battery can basically do that in the tube, because there usually are springs on both sides, and that can either damage your flashlight or damage the battery, which can cause thermal runaway or explosion or venting or something nasty like that. So it is really important. It's not just a matter of quality. These things are built in a specific way to take that shock. They basically have a tube that can handle that and absorb that shock so that the battery's not wiggling back and forth like that and causing damage. So pay attention to that as well. Last thing, of course, we're going to talk about is quality. Quality varies dramatically. This is a $20 Home Depot flashlight. This will probably break the first time I drop it on the ground. Just because it was 20 bucks does not mean it was a good flashlight. It's not waterproof. It's probably not even water resistant. It's not shock proof. It's not very bright. It's maybe like 200, 300 lumens at best. It's big, it's gigantic, its runtime is very short. That $20 does not mean quality. On the other hand, for example, I paid 20 something bucks for this Cr123 Archer, which is a very good flashlight. Which is a very high quality, about 300 lumen flashlight. It's small, it's pocketable, it's very waterproof, it's very tough and rugged, and won't break. These things have the same output. So you look at these two, this flashlight is much bigger. This has the same output, the same lumens, but it's waterproof, it's shockproof. People have boiled these, frozen them, run them over with cars, they're not going to break. That's not going to happen with this. Not only that, but the runtime on this, significantly longer. Way longer than that. So in the end, $20, 2 flashlights, you get way more with this. You get way more with this. That's just how it works. I'm sorry guys, when you go to the big box stores, you're not getting quality, you're paying for the big box store. You can easily spend $20 on a flashlight and get much better quality by buying a decent brand name. Olight, ThruNite, JetBeam, Nitecore, one of them. All really, really good brands and really high quality, and they can, your money's going to go a lot further when it comes down to it. I know it's tempting to buy the hardware store, you know, like the Home Depot, Walmart flashlights, but in the end, they always break. You see a lot of stuff on this channel back in the day where I bought a lot of cheap flashlights and made videos on them. Guess what? You don't see them here on the table because they're all broken. Broken, fallen apart, and have died over the years. So I've changed my philosophy. I found out better brands and realized that there are flashlights you can spend $10 on, like this Coast, which are pretty decent for the money. You know, you can spend $20 on some of these and get a really good high quality flashlight. Whereas you can spend 20 bucks at the hardware store or Walmart and not get anywhere close to that. So when you're looking at that, remember that you're not getting quality unless you go with a good brand name. And I think ThruNite's a big one. ThruNite sells direct to the customers. There's no middleman. They're able to sell their products at a very low price considering what the rest of the market is doing. It's awesome. You know, you get a lot of quality, a lot of value for the money. Are they best flashlights on the market? No, but I definitely think they're one of the best values out there. So, I know we've given you a lot here, guys. A lot of information to think over. And I know all these flashlights aren't even reviewed yet, but there it is, guys. I mean, there's a lot to think about when it comes to the world of flashlights as to what you're going to need and what you're going to use. You know, for some guy who's maybe a doctor, this little ThruNite TI4 is awesome. Why? It always starts in low mode, so you're not going to blast someone in the eyes with a strobe or a high mode, which that's a great feature when it comes to, say, you're a doctor, dentist, or something. Maybe you're an inspector or something like that. Nurse, you don't want to be blasting people in the eyes with 500 lumens. Awesome little idea geared towards that kind of use. You look differently, something like, you know, like an EDC flashlight, like this ThruNite. Very bright, very easy, very pocketable, all around really good for carrying in your pocket. It's awesome. Then you look at something bigger, you know, like this weapon light, the M21. Great weapon light, 700 lumens, tough, waterproof, you know, good run times, all that, but it's not really something you can carry in your pocket. It's not something that, you know, you're going to be able to comfortably carry. Yeah, you can maybe wear it on your belt. Don't come with a holster. TN15, awesome hunting flashlight. Taking this with me deer hunting a lot this year. This thing throws a beam like you wouldn't believe. It's bright. It's got a mega long lasting run time. It's very safe. A lot of protection. Awesome flashlight. It's expensive though. But how many of these flashlights are you going to go through before you decide just to spend the money and get the nicer ones? So a lot of information to digest, guys. And so much to look at and compare for your uses. You know, whether you are, like I said, are you hunting? Are you putting it on a weapon? Are you a doctor? Are you looking just for EDC? Different lights for different folks, different uses, and it can really be challenging to find just the right light for your needs.